Came across a piece on the psychology of waiting this week that appeared in the New York Times. And there was a journalist that wrote it along with a waiting consultant from MIT. And one of the studies that they looked at involved an airport in Houston, I'm not sure which one, but it was about the wait time at baggage claim because the airport had been getting a lot of complaints from passengers about how long they had to wait. And so the airport took action, hired additional staff, additional baggage claim folks to get the stuff off the plane and over to the carousels as quickly as possible. Surprisingly, and they beat the industry average, lowered the wait times, but surprisingly, the stream of complaints continued. It really baffled them. And then they sort of figured out what they needed to do because there was still some wait time. What they needed to do was they were placing the arrival gates right across from the baggage claims. And what they needed to do was move the arrival gate further down the concourse, not right in front of the baggage claim, so that people had to get off the plane and walk and walk and walk and then get to the baggage claim. And then the baggage was often already there, moving around the carousel, and the complaints dropped off to just about zero. What they found was people don't mind waiting if it is occupied time. They don't like waiting if they have nothing to do. If it is unoccupied time, if you're just looking at your watch or your phone and staring at the empty baggage carousel, then it's frustrating. But if you're actually walking, that's okay. The moral of the story is give us something to do while we wait, and we're good with that. And it gets us to Nehemiah. Between chapter 1 and chapter 2, we have about 4 months. And we dug in last week on chapter 1 where Nehemiah got a call from God to do something about a very serious situation. The city of Jerusalem had been destroyed. The people were living in disgrace. And he felt a stirring from God to do something about that. But he waited between chapter 1 and chapter 2 about 4 months. But before that, there had been an indefinite time of waiting, years of waiting as he worked this secular work in the palace of the Persian king. And he couldn't have been exactly sure, why am I here? Like, what part in God's plan do I play working as the cupbearer of the king of the Persian Empire? And so I imagine him trying to make these connections between his secular work and his identity as a child of God. And what we learn is this: waiting on the Lord can feel to us like unoccupied time, but the reality is God is always working. The Spirit of the Lord is behind the scenes setting everything up. And we need to be faithful. Nehemiah knew how to wait on the Lord. He had perspective that something larger was going on. He had faith that at just the right time, God would make clear what he was supposed to do to participate in the purpose and plan of the Lord. So a key part of living by faith is understanding, yes, God is at work. Even when we can't see how he's moving details around, how the hand of the Lord is guiding things, we know by faith he is, in fact, at work. And we rest in that knowledge in the waiting rooms of life. David was acquainted with waiting, and he wrote about it, as did many of the men and women of faith in the Bible. He wrote in Psalm 27:14, "Wait for the Lord." Wait for the Lord. It requires some strength to do this. Be strong. Let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. David knew about being in the waiting room. He had been anointed future king of Israel by Samuel, and then years went by. Years in deserted places. years fleeing for his life from the current king, Saul, until finally it was time for him to occupy the throne. Esther, also the city of Susa, the same city where Nehemiah is operating. Esther had what's my purpose? Why am I being pulled from my family and from my community of faith into this secular palace of this king? What's going on? And then, it was for chapter 4, such a time as this. She knew how to wait. Abraham and Sarah waited years and years between receiving the promise of child and actually receiving their baby. What about Jesus? Public ministry wasn't launched until he's like 30 years old. Even the Son of God knew how to wait and prepare for that moment. And so when we try to kind of push things forward, move the timetable up, we get into trouble. But when we see this place of waiting for what it is, a time of preparation, a time when there is a lot to do, then we know what we need to be about, just like Nehemiah did. So he's heartbroken in chapter 1 with the report of how bad things are back in Jerusalem, 1,000 miles away, about the horrid conditions that God's people were living under, city in ruins, struggling to eke out an existence. And so in chapter 1, Nehemiah was heartbroken. He mourned. He didn't eat. He prayed. And he planned. In those 4 months after hearing the news about Jerusalem until coming back into the presence of the king, Nehemiah had been working out a plan of action with much prayer. Chapter 2, verses 1 to 4. In the month of Nisan, this is like March, April, about this time of year, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. The king said to me, "Why is your face sad, seeing as you're not sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart." Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, "Let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad? When the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire." The king said to me, "What are you requesting?" So I prayed to the God of heaven. Now we're going to pause right there. We saw this last week. Nehemiah was cupbearer for the king of Persia. This is not just a glorified sommelier. This is a position of leadership and administrative duties in the palace of the king of Persia. He had the ear of the king. He was part of the inner circle of the king of Persia, the greatest empire on the planet at that time. And I love the honesty. The Bible is always honest with us. And right here in the text, Nehemiah confesses to us, verse 2, I was very much afraid. I was very much afraid. You know, being courageous and being fearless are not the same thing. Not at all. In fact, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage requires the presence of some fear. You're not courageous if there's not a little bit of fear there. Courage is the ability to act in the presence of fear. And for us, a people of faith, it is believing that our God is bigger than whatever scary circumstance we face. So Nehemiah was very much afraid. But he knew it was time to step out. He knew God had been setting this up specifically, giving him a vision for rebuilding Jerusalem, one that he had been working on for months, maybe years, maybe even before he got the desperate reports from back home in Judah. And so it's time to set this vision out, to go public before the most powerful man on the planet at the time, King Artaxerxes of Persia. And as you may have noticed in the text, it was a no-no to bring your sadness before the king, to bring your personal baggage. So you had a bad day, or you had a little personal tragedy or setback or frustration. You don't bring that before this this potentate, this king who carries the weight of an empire on his shoulders, so many responsibilities, so many concerns. You don't get to bring your personal stuff before him. But Nehemiah perceived that this was the moment, the divine moment, to bring the Jerusalem project before Artaxerxes. So the king saw that his friend, his servant was sad and asked him, what's going on? Why are you so sad? And he said, I'm sad because why shouldn't I be? The ancestral home of my people is in shambles. How could I not be sad about that? And then the moment of truth, verse 4. Nehemiah, what are you asking me to do? Did you notice what Nehemiah did next? I bet you did as we were reading that. He prayed. This wasn't a thought out, beautiful oration of a prayer. This was not even an audible prayer. This was a silent one-liner, something like, okay, Lord, here we go. For God's people, prayer and preparation always go together. There are these formal prayers, these beautiful prayers, well thought out prayers like the one we had in Nehemiah chapter 1, recorded for us word for word. Then there are these organic, impulsive, spur of the moment prayers because we are connected to God. 24/7 in the workplace, secular job, driving on 635, spending time with the family. We are connected to God. We're in relationship with God. So we bring struggle and success before the Lord all throughout the day. Weather looks pretty nice out there, so I think we're good. You know, I was thinking about this week how some people have a relationship with God. Other people just have a religion about God. Relationship with God, religion about God. Nehemiah had a relationship with God. And one sign of that, of having that relationship, is that your faith in the Lord bleeds into all areas of your life. It is not just a Sunday morning thing. It is something that happens when you're clocked in at the job, verse 4. It is something when you are out and about. It's not compartmentalized. It's not segmented away from the rest of your life. If the Lord is not Lord in my workplace, in my home, in my recreational activities, then I don't have a relationship with him. So Nehemiah prayed, and at that moment, very clearly we find out he had a plan prepared for this moment. We see it in the rest of the chapter. We'll pick it up here in verse 5. I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. That's an ambitious plan. The king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, how long will you be gone? When will you return? So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. So he knew how long, right? How long this was going to take. I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. A letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy. And the king granted me what I asked, for the good hand of the Lord was upon me. So prayer undergirds all of this. That's why we're going to talk about his plan, and prayer is not part of the plan. Prayer is in every part of the plan. It's not like step one, pray, next step. No, prayer is all throughout the plan if you read the book of Nehemiah. Now, his plan involves some various elements. One of them was a timetable for rebuilding Jerusalem. Remember, the king says, okay, say that I approve this. How long is it going to take? He knew how long it was going to take, more or less. And we know that Nehemiah was gone from Susa for about 12 years. His plan also involved getting royal sanction for the project. Could have gone, undercover, could have done this kind of off the books a little bit, but he wanted official Persian sanction for the rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem, asking for letters, with the stamp of the king that would have gone with him. So when anyone messes with him, hey, got our documentation. His plan also involved a list of needed resources. I mean, he says, hey, by the way, right here, what are you requesting? Well, I also need a letter for Asaph, king of the forest, so I can get the wood that I need, the timbers I need, massive timbers to rebuild city gates and walls and homes. Part of the plan was recruiting a team. He didn't want to do this alone. He knew he needed a team to go with him. So chapter 2, we didn't read this week. We'll get to it next week. But verses 17 to 20, he is recruiting his team. He's recruiting people to join him, to partner with him in this. And I think you can kind of see the truth of that ancient saying. You've probably heard this before. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right? Go together. Number 5, it's clear that he had a plan for the actual project as well. A plan for rebuilding Jerusalem, where they would begin to work. We're going to work on gates. We're going to work on walls. How long it would take. The priorities of the project. So clearly, this man of faith was using his wait time productively. He understood that waiting room time is not wasted time. The wait, look, it's not something that most of us enjoy. Preparation is outside of the spotlight. It's not sexy. It's not glamorous. It can be frustrating, but it is essential, this waiting room time, for preparation and for prayer for what is to come. One more thing, and I think this is important. I don't want to skip over this. One more thing. How does Nehemiah react to legitimate injustice and suffering? What does he do? Because some folks just kind of check out. It's just demoralizing. You look around the world, or you look in your own neighborhood, and there is like hatred and injustice, and there's suffering. What's wrong with it? And some people just kind of check out. I'll just do my own thing. It's too heavy. Some people check out on God. How could there be a God with everything that's wrong in the world? They turn their back on God. Nehemiah does neither of those things, which is why he is an incredibly fruitful servant of the Lord, and why we see his relationship with the Lord flourishing on full display for us. He has this robust faith that is equipped to deal with this real broken down world. This space where things are not as they should be. It's a place of suffering. It's a place where bad things are happening to good people, and Nehemiah's faith has equipped him to deal with it. He sees what's messed up. It hurts him. It breaks his heart. He mourns over it. Really, his vision for rebuilding Jerusalem is watered by the tears of his broken heart. What was happening back home in Judah? It was wrong. That God's people were living in disgrace and in constant danger. That's not right. They're living as second-class citizens in their own homeland, in the promised land. That's not right. Nehemiah has the vision to address the situation. He senses a calling to stand up for the hurting and to rally others to the vision so that actual change can occur. So what about us? The pandemic paradigm is ending. More of you are coming back every week, which is why we need to arrive early, sit down front, fill up all the pews, move to the center. Okay, there. But the pandemic paradigm is ending. For some of us, you think it's already over. Enough already. Enough of the protocols, enough of the rules. I get it. I hear you. It's almost over. Just a little longer. Just a little more wait time. And as we wait and as we work together, what should we be doing? How should we occupy our time? Well, I think the key word is opportunity. Right now, I have an opportunity, you have an opportunity to deepen our relationship with the Lord, and there is nothing more important than that for you. Deepen your walk with the Lord right now. You don't have to wait to do that. Growing an opportunity to plan and prepare for what comes next, for how we're going to rebuild. And listen, this is so important. We have the opportunity to treat each other with patience and kindness and grace. Though we may find the current moment still less than ideal, we believe God is at work in this waiting room time. And we know that we're in this together. Paul, I love these words in Ephesians because he is writing from incarceration. He's writing as a prisoner of the Roman government, less than ideal circumstances, all right? And Paul talks to us about what do we do? What is the spirit of this moment as we're waiting and enduring? He says in Ephesians 4, 1-3, I therefore, reminding them of his less than ideal situation, a prisoner for the Lord, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling for which you have been called. You've been called, brother and sister. I urge you to live in a manner worthy of that great calling with all what? Humility and gentleness and patience. I urge you, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit by the bond of peace. So ruin to restoration. In the year 2021, that is our path. Ruin to restoration. It's a journey we're on together. Part of it is happening here and now as we emerge from the pandemic paradigm. We rebuild together. Part of it is later. Part of it is that ultimate heavenly destination where by faith we believe the Lord will usher in a new heavens and a new earth, a complete rebuild, a complete reboot. And in Jesus Christ, we know this time is coming. So this morning, it could be that you personally need prayers. It could be that you need to cross that line of faith, seal that relationship with Jesus, begin walking as his disciple, being baptized into Jesus. You can do that this morning. Let's stand, let's respond together.